welcome to another episode of This, That, and the Other. And I was thinking about another subject, or another very obscure subject, and where this all got started. I on Facebook they run various strips of Dennis the Menace, and every now and then you'll see Dennis's grandfather, who Dennis, I guess it's supposed to be kind of like him. They're supposed to be kind of like each other. Alice's father. In these comic strips, throughout the years and the comic books and everything, Alice's father will come visit sometimes, but really nothing is mentioned about her mother. Whatever happened to her mother, it makes me, a lot of questions come about on that with the Dennis the Menace comic, and I don't believe that Hank Ketchum ever addressed that one. What really happened there, but as far as I know, the marital status of Dennis's grandfather was unknown. From what I heard, there was one mention of Alice's mother, and it had to do with her mother, Henry's mother-in-law, sending a tie to Henry, and I guess he didn't like it and he threw it away, and Alice got mad at him for throwing the tie away. That's the only reference I've ever heard made to Alice's mother. Actually, I saw, back in the 1980s, I saw a cartoon of Dennis the Menace Mother's Day, and I remember Dennis mentioning something to his mother about wishing her mother Valentine's Day, and his mother is kind of looking for words, and she's like, "Well, like my mother's not around," or something like that. It's something to that effect. I don't know exactly what the wording was, but so I'm guessing that she must have been an only child, and her dad must have raised her. Must have been a single father that raised her from childhood, through. So that's the impression I get, because nothing's really ever mentioned about her. So what happened to her? I wish Hank Ketchum was still around, so that question could be asked him. I don't know if anybody ever posed that question to him or not, or he ever gave any kind of answer on that one. But brings me to different memories of that Dennis the Menace, and I thought one of the best part about Dennis the Menace was his relationship with Mr. Wilson, that neighbor. He'd always come over and drive Mr. Wilson crazy. Mrs. Wilson always was more the calm wife of Mr. Wilson. She was always good with Dennis. She'd make cookies and everything, and that's probably partly why Dennis wanted to come over there. I think he just liked to bother Mr. Wilson, to tell you the truth. It's funny, Joey, Dennis's little friend, so he was afraid of Mr. Wilson. Dennis like, what's there to be afraid of? It's fun to drive Mr. Wilson crazy. I think that's the way Dennis looked at it, and I've always thought if they had ever kept doing a progressive version of the Dennis the Menace, as I'm talking about progression of life, him getting older, I'm thinking he would have ended up being a lawyer. That's just what I would have thought, if the way, just his personality and everything. And there, he had Margaret, who drove, as Dennis drove Mr. Wilson crazy, Margaret drove Dennis crazy. There was the Italian girl Gina that seemed to be the girl that Dennis liked. She's kind of tomboyish, and he had other friends of Dennis's too. There was a Tommy that was in earlier comic strips that kind of I think disappeared during the 1970s, and there were others as well. Of course, he had his dog Ruff, and his parents Henry and Alice Mitchell. Yeah. didn't. I don't know. There's some questions about that comic strip, but a more questionable one was that Charlie Brown comic strip. That one, you never saw an adult in that comic strip. And Charlie Brown was bald. Charlie Brown didn't have hair. Maybe one little strand of hair. I and I was I remember Snoopy didn't walk on all fours like dogs do. Snoopy walked on two feet, stood upright. That was kind of an usual thing that they had. And Charlie Brown was always being picked on, and you had Lucy that was always being mean to Charlie Brown. She was kind of like, she kind of reminded me of Margaret and Dennis the Menace. And you had Lucy's little brother Linus that always had to have a security blanket with him. You had Schroeder, the one that played the piano all the time that Lucy liked. And you had Peppermint Patty. There was a tomboyish one that liked Charlie Brown. She called him Chuck. She was always like into playing football and baseball, all kinds of various sports. You had Charlie Brown's little sister Sally, and you had Frida, the girl talking about her natural curly hair. And there were many more characters in the Charlie Brown comic strip. But that brings me to remember the Sunday Funnies when my mother and dad used to read them to me. I remember my mother would only read certain ones. She'd read what she liked, the ones that the comic strips she liked, and ones I remember hearing was Blondie, that man that about Dagwood Bumstead and his wife Blondie. And from what I understand from the history of that comic strip, my dad had told me Dagwood Bumstead came from a rich family and he lost money during the Depression, and his family did not like Blondie because she didn't come from a rich family, and marrying Blondie. And it was either he lost money during the Depression or his family disinherited him because he married Blondie. I'm not sure what it was. I don't know the whole history of the Dagwood comic or the Blondie comic strip. But anyway, you had that one. You had Beetle Bailey, the soldier in the army that was lazy, and Sarge, Big Sarge would always be getting on him all the time, and they kind of had a clueless general that ran the camp, and his wife ran him. And there was a comic strip, Mama, little old lady, had 3 grown children, and she drove them crazy all the time. And the youngest son lived with her and was constantly out of a job. He'd have a job for a few days and wouldn't last, and he was just living off of her. Quite a case. There's a lot of various comic strips. I used to like to look at Baldo, about the Hispanic boy and his little sister and the dad, and the mother I guess had died, and they had a Tia Carmen, an old lady that was maybe their dad's aunt, that did the housework, cooking and everything, kind of took care of the family, ran the house. And there's quite a few other. Oh, you had what was it, Better or for Worse, a Canadian comic strip, a housewife, or actually she later on started her own store, and her husband was a dentist, and she had a son and daughter, and they had a dog. And finally, after the son and daughter are teenagers, she has another daughter named April, the youngest one. And that was an interesting comic strip. There were more as well. There was Snuffy Smith, about the hillbilly couple. That was another comic strip that was around. I don't know if they even print that one anymore. There was Gasoline Alley, and that's just to name a few of the various comic strips I remember from the Sunday paper. It's gotten to the point now. I don't buy the newspaper anymore. The Sunday Washington Post now costs $6, and I'm sorry, I'm not paying that much money for a newspaper. I mean, I know I could go online and try to look up these comic strips if I wanted to, or go to the library, but I don't have time to do either one of the two. So that anyway, those are memories that I have of comics strips that I used to read. And like I said, I'm looking for ideas on shows to do in the future. If it's feasible, I will research it and base a show on it. As always, like, subscribe, share. Thanks for watching.